Shalom, everybody. Welcome back to the Baal HaSulam's Matan Torah with commentary by Rebbe Avraham Morechai Gottlieb, who will be referring to as the Rebbe Shlita. I want to wish everybody a Shana Tova Umetuka, a sweet new year. I heard recently that we don't say Shana Tova just as is, in contrast to a sweet new year. Why? Of course it's going to be a good year, Shana Tova. His desire to give goodness to creation is happening at every microsecond. So of course, if the Creator is giving us this year and giving us every event, and it's only good, despite how we might see it or how we might feel, then it's an obvious statement. So what does it mean to say sweet? To say sweet means that we have the ability to interpret it and to taste it as being sweet. That we have the consciousness to ingrain it as sweet. I believe that was from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Beautiful idea. So we are in Ha'arvut, the mutual guarantee. I want to read the paragraph of the last class, the last paragraph of the actual Baal HaSulam's words, not the commentary, as a lead-in to this week's class. So I'm going to start reading from the bottom of 102, paragraph starting with the ones. Then we're going to go skip into page 104 in the middle of the page. I apologize ahead of time. Getting over a cold, so you might hear some sniffles here and there. Bear with me. So we ended last week's class, or the words of the Baal HaSulam, that is, with at the bottom of 102 again. Once the whole nation unanimously agreed and said, we will do and we will hear, from Exodus 24:7, each member of Israel became a guarantor that not a single thing will be lacking from any member of the nation. Only then did they become worthy of receiving the Torah, and not before, because with this collective responsibility, each member of the nation was liberated from worrying about the needs of his or her own body and could keep the commandment of, and love your fellow as yourself, in all its measure. Each person knew for certain that he or she was surrounded by 600,000 loyal lovers who were standing ready to care for him or her, as explained in section 15. Therefore, each individual could freely give all of his or her possessions to anyone in need, since there was no need for concern regarding the maintenance of his or her own body. And as we clarified last class, in essence, that's true freedom. Freedom from the will to receive, freedom from the clause of self-love, not the healthy self-love of saying, I'm a creation of the Creator, and I'm beloved by Him, and I'm a special individual. That's a healthy self-love. More so, the self-love of receiving for oneself alone and focusing on oneself for all that one does, whether it's even giving to someone else or it's just to receive for oneself. So then we're skipping to the middle of page 104. So you clearly see that the giving of the Torah had to be delayed until they came out of Egypt and became a nation of their own, when all their needs were under their control without dependence on others. Then they were prepared to accept upon themselves the above-mentioned guarantee, and afterward they were given the Torah. For this reason, it follows that even after receiving the Torah, if a few people from Israel would betray the guarantee in return to the contamination of self-love without consideration of their friends, then the amount of need that was dependent on those few would become a nuisance for each individual Israelite to care for it, himself or herself. Those few who betrayed will have no pity on the one who is in need, and consequently, the fulfillment of the commandment of, and love your fellow as yourself, or the commandment of loving the other, will be precluded for the whole of Israel, as explained above. In this way, Those rebels cause also the Torah observant to remain in their contamination, in self-love, for they will not be able to engage in the commandment and love your fellow as yourself. V'ahavta l're'echa kamocha, and perfect their love for others without their help. The Rebbe Shlita says on the spot, comment 83, if you fulfill one mitzvah and thus follow the path of loving the other, then you tip the scale in the direction of loving the other for the society in general. If you commit a sin and thus follow the path of self-love, then you tip the scale for everyone in favor of self-love. We'll talk more about the notion of being on the same boat in the next class, but in essence, we're all one. So either way you do it, whether you're doing good or bad, you're going to tip the scale for everybody. A lot of responsibility. Comment 84, in the same section, the mitzvah of and love your fellow as yourself can be fulfilled in a healthy social framework in which each person is prepared to serve the other with the intention of coming to love the other. For he or she understands that the optimal society for Israel and the whole world is one in which each loves the other. Each will offer himself or herself and his or her talents to the public without collecting any reward, and then no one will lack anything. Sorry, one moment. Just going to turn the lights back on. I think someone thinks I'm not here. Thank you for your patience. So the idea might be utopian to say that we don't want to collect any reward and we're performing at our optimal, and that no one will lack anything if we're just providing for others. But the truth is that it's an inevitable reality of our spiritual progression. The Creator gave us the inheritance that we say the world to come, but a nickname for the level of Bina, as we learn in the Chokhmah, we learn in the Kabbalah, the stage of giving to give. Giving to give is something that we are trying to achieve in this lifetime. Therefore, the world to come being the exalted, higher level of consciousness that we are attempting to attain is something that we're not waiting for the afterlife. We're trying to get it right here, right now. With that said, that's our inheritance. Our inheritance is to become righteous and to elevate ourselves along with our society and the world at large. So we must have emunah, we must have the faith that such a thing is possible, despite how utopian it might seem, and to hope for that. In essence, that should be an aspect of our prayers throughout the day. For example, if we're davening, if we're praying the Amidah, there's so many prayers in regards to the building of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, and Mashiach, and bringing sustenance to oneself, and the healing of all of Klal Yisrael, and things of this nature. So, to point these ideas at the center of we're all trying to get to this higher level, we're all trying to build this type of society via our own elevated status of consciousness, at least the desire to get there. As I've heard the Rebbe Shita say, one who desires to be a tzaddik is already considered a tzaddik. And there's plenty of examples in Chazal, our sages, who say even the thought of doing tshuva, even the thought of realigning and coming back to the way of the Creator already makes one a righteous individual. At the same time, the Rebbe of Koch says, who are Chasidim? Those who say they're not Chasidim. the principle that if I say I'm a tzaddik, I'm certainly not. I'm very, very far from realizing the truth. Because as we approach Yom Kippur, the truth of the matter is, the more that we can notice our evil within, the more we can see our self-love, then the bigger kalim we'll build, the bigger vessels will be provided through our own sorrow at where we want to be and where we are, the contrast of wanting to be able to truly give and truly love, and not just to serve ourselves. All of these aspects of meditation and contemplation and accounting of the soul equate to receiving godly light. It's specifically through those actions that we're able to receive godly light. But you can say, but we've been learning Torah mitzvos, we're giving to others, this is how we refine ourselves. It's true. By doing, we're able to see where we're holding. By doing, I'm able to see, am I really loving? Was I really giving? If we just stay in the computer chair, on the couch, or in bed, we might be able to notice that that's where we're staying, and that in itself is an aspect of the evilness in terms of self-love and the lack of movement. But I digress. I wanted to just make a quick side note as we're approaching Yom Kippur very soon, and we speak about this utopian society that's hard to contemplate and hard to believe in, that we have an idea that there is either tshuva done by ourselves for us to achieve the world to come in this world, being that level of bina, that higher consciousness of giving to give. And if we don't do it ourselves by taking on Torah and mitzvot authentically through such intention to come to the state of loving the other, and to have that in our mind's eye throughout the day, as much as we can, every second if possible, then it says, if I'm not mistaken in the Gemara, Chazal bring down that if we don't do tshuva, then the Creator will bring a king worse than Haman, who wanted to annihilate us in the story of Megillat Esther, the story of Purim. He'll bring a king worse than Haman to force us to tshuva. So either way it goes. Either way, we're heading there. We're heading to this ideal. We're heading to our inheritance. The question is, do we want to judge ourselves here and really contemplate where we're holding in terms of our self-love versus our altruism, and therefore save ourselves the judgment above? Or are we going to take the hits above? Either way, we have to suffer. Suffering is an intrinsic part of life. Suffering is not bad. Suffering is suffering. In fact, it's good because everything is in order to connect us to the Creator, and it helps build us the vessels necessary to receive that godly light, which in essence is what the Creator wants us to do. He wants us to be receiving His light in order to give goodness to Him. Of course, the highest level is spoken about. And to be fair, Shlomo Melech says there's nothing new under the sun. So whether the king of Haman will be appointed, or whether Haman's already here, acting out in some way, or it's Para or anything, surely we can make connections and try to relate these archetypes of evil in our society. And I'm sure we can have a lot of fun and make the connections perhaps competently. But more importantly, we should look inside ourselves and say, this is the Haman, this is the Paro, so on and so forth, and see where these inner aspects are and try to convert them into giving as opposed to receiving and calling ourselves God. God forbid. To continue, we're in the middle of page 105. The Baal HaSulam says, question: is there not still an element of self-love due to the fact that maximal fulfillment of and love your fellow as yourself is possible only on condition that everyone is assured of his or her minimal needs? For, after all is said and done, we must have our minimal needs satisfied. Only when this is assured, we can begin to work for the sake of others. Answer: minimal needs are not to be considered self-love. For necessary, Quote, "The necessary will not be condemned nor praised." The translator adds here, comment, an expression frequently used in Jewish law. Continues the Baal HaSulam, and this, of course, is when indeed we are speaking only about the necessary. Furthermore, Jewish society is a society that went out of Egypt, and since Egypt symbolizes self-love, this means that in some general way, Jewish society has essentially abandoned the character of self-love, despite aberrations due to other factors, adds the translator. Therefore, this is a society of intrinsically righteous souls that are drawn to follow the path of and love your fellow as yourself, and to give maximum consideration to the other's needs. And it's true. You look at the charity in the world, and relative to the population of Jewry, whether secular or religious, what have you, we are extremely philanthropic by nature. Meaning to say that we can observe in society that there is an inclination towards loving the other and giving. Charity in Hebrew is tzedakah. Tzedakah also is righteousness, from the root of tzedek. Another issue worth noting is that each individual has different needs, so the society will have to be conscious of this and prepared to take it into account when providing for the needs of everyone. We're on 106 now, top of the page. In actual fact, the progress in the direction of societal cooperation is definitely only gradual, and the giving and the sacrifice for the other is gradual. For the individual's will to receive does not free him or her to become a selfless giver instantaneously. Rather, this is an internal battle, and slowly, step by step, an individual can conquer areas of his or her personal sphere for the benefit of selfless giving. And apparently, this gradual progress takes place similarly on the social plane. Again, we're all pieces of the puzzle. If one piece in a 8 billion piece puzzle changes, objectively the entire puzzle is shifted. The image of the puzzle is different, whether we notice it or not. We see clearly that all of Israel are responsible for one another, both on the positive side and the negative side. On the positive side, if they keep the mutual guarantee to the extent that each takes care to fulfill the needs of his or her friends, then due to this, they become capable of fully keeping the Torah and mitzvot, which constitutes bringing contentment to their maker. The Rebbe Shita says, for when people arrive at maximal selfless giving, then they are as children of God. Walking in the ways for which their Maker brought them to the world. From this, God has contentment. I assume the Hebrew that the Rebbe Shlita used was perhaps Hana, Nachat Ruach, perhaps as well. Simple principle here. A parent wants their child to go in their way. And a parent is gladdened and has contentment when their child goes in their way, whether it's their specific way in life or whether it's what they desire and think is best for the child. If the father owns a company, chances are a child of his might take over. If someone is living a life and raising a family of Torah and mitzvot, surely they'll be happy if their children are connected to and want and desire and express a life of holiness in regards to Torah and mitzvot. For example, I, being an aspiring Ashlag chassid, would love for my kids to connect to this Torah and this philosophy. At the same time, I have to understand and respect the fact that there are those out there who do abide by Torah and mitzvot and whose children might not be at the moment. They might be off the path, so to speak, or on their own path. They're on a journey. And for them, the parents don't care if chassid this or that. It doesn't matter. As long as their kid is connected to Torah and mitzvah, that's what's important. So at the base, that's still following in their way. It's a matter of similarity of form in essence. That's why some secular Jewish parents, for example, get very, very scared at the notion that their children might be taking on a life of being an observant Jew, because they understand that come tomorrow, I can't cook for them anymore. They need only kosher food and kosher pots, and I can't really talk to them about shows anymore. They're not watching TV, so on and so forth. What do we have to talk about? But in contrast, the beauty of Torah and mitzvot and living in a Torah society is that whether you're 100 years old or you're 5 years old, at the Shabbos table, everyone's speaking, hopefully, about Torah. Same matters. Same anchor that connects us all. It's a beautiful thing. The Baal HaSulam finishes this section also on the negative side. If a part of the nation does not want to keep the mutual guarantee, but rather chooses to be absorbed with self-love, they cause the rest of the nation to remain immersed in their contamination and lowliness without ever finding any way out of their contaminated condition, as previously explained. I think this is a very difficult thing to grapple with, because what this is entertaining is that no matter how hard one tries and wants to develop, that the variables and challenges that they face is intimately related to the level of the entire generation. Meaning to say, if, for example, our generation right here, right now, is arguably the most decadent and lowly and most chutzpahdik, has the biggest ego and the biggest coarseness relative to prior generations, if you take all of society and all of humanity in account, then how does that relate to one's personal work if they want to reach Dveikus, if they want to have adhesion and union with the Creator? So I think the middle point here is that despite the challenges that one might experience given that dynamic of society being most decadent, for example, and the desire of wanting to come into unification with the Creator, so everything in life, as the Rebbe Shita says, leads us to prayer. Whether it's good or bad, we should say Baruch Hashem and say thank you to the Creator for all things, because all things are for the good, whether we see it or feel it or not. So, with that said, if we see such society, first and foremost, we want to change the world by changing ourselves, as we've spoken about here. Change one piece of the puzzle, you change the whole puzzle. And as we continue to develop, at some point, we'll be able to have more kochos, more powers, and more vessels in order to also maybe do work for the society as a whole, not just on the individual level, but also for the communal level, and to help. And when we see the contrast, when we know the pains of those who are far, seemingly, then that should inspire us to pray that much stronger, to raise these requests in order to bring the abundance of consciousness within all of us so that we can come closer to the Creator. Again, I'm wishing everyone a happy New Year, a sweet New Year. More importantly, that we should be able to interpret and see and taste the sweetness in all things, and that we have a meaningful fast and prayers on Yom Kippur. It's a very powerful day. In essence, is relating to a lot of what we're talking about here with Nasi V'Nishma, Malchut and Bina, these different levels. And in essence, just fasting is such a big tikkun. I mean, talk about the masach. I want to eat and I'm not going to. So I make this deflection. And it's said that in itself, I believe the Arizal says that, is a huge tikkun. It's a huge correction. So we can even do that at the least, whew, amazing. But to try to connect to the energy of the day, Sat Hashem, God willing, with Creator's help, we should all be able to rise ever higher in closeness to Him and to each other. Before I part ways, I'm just going to check if there's any comments or questions. Wesley, wishing you well. Very interesting comments. Shalom to you. All the best. What I would say is that the notion of something being reformed or changed relative to the Torah and the level of consciousness that our sages of Chazal were at is a difficult thing to grasp when you're actually connected to a Masorah, to a tradition. There's nothing like Judaism relative to other paths in the world, as our tradition is from Mount Sinai and has been an unbroken chain until today. From Moshe to Yoshua, to the elders, to the prophets, the men of the Great Assembly, and to Chazal, and the rabbis down the line until right here, right now. There's 175,000 different versions of the New Testament, if I'm not mistaken, and there's only one Torah. So, some things to contemplate. What's the tradition? Where is it coming from? Is the source authentic? Who's interpreting it? What level of consciousness are they holding at? So on and so forth. But I do wish you well. The energies that are on the world and oversee the world on days like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, it's for everyone to connect to. Whether even non-Jews connect to it or not, it does oversee the entire world. So, wishing you all the best. Take care.